We've come to part 3 of our series on fantasy and sci-fi story hooks. It's like a fire sale for ideas. I have story hooks, and I'm giving them away. Everything must go. Well, not everything. After all, I do quite like the Dragon's Dream saga, which I would definitely qualify in the genre we're talking about today, and that is Cyberpunk, Dystopia, and post-apocalyptic adventures. Fear not, though I am known to dabble quite a bit in this space, I'm not the type to think of my fellow writers as competitors. I want us all to be best friends and make a blanket fort and tell each other stories, so let's talk about it. Before we get into that, though, here's a reminder to check out dcferguson.com for all my latest videos, overviews of my books, exclusive behind-the-scenes content for each of my series, and you can sign up for my newsletter. I should also mention that you can help me out in a big way if you like this video, subscribe, and share it with any friends that might also enjoy the art of storytelling. The first question you might ask yourself is, why did I lump all 3 of these together in a sort of Future Worlds episode? Well, as much as you might say that Johnny Mnemonic is super far removed from, say, The Walking Dead, you might be surprised to find that this space has a tendency to share a ton of similar messaging, metaphor, and tropes with each other than anything that they do differently. In fact, when we discuss these categories today, you might find it difficult to ever separate them again. They're like a family that all have the same hair and eye color and wear matching outfits on vacation. With that in mind, the first trope we're going to discuss today is that of the Rotten Utopia. In this particular type of story, our futuristic setting envisions a world better than ours, one that not only appears to have evolved past us, but actively looks down its nose at our present time and dismisses you and I as savages. Only, that's not the end of the story, that's just the beginning. If you scratch the surface, that veneer falls away, and it turns out this utopia is hiding a terrible secret. We see this in Hunger Games, where the setting is decidedly dystopian. But we also see it in the sci-fi drama Gattaca, which is much closer to the realm of cyberpunk, but technically it's biopunk because of eugenics and whatnot. It's splitting hairs. Also, the messaging in both of these films is markedly different. Hunger Games is about rising up against authoritarianism, which is very similar to the next trope we're going to be discussing, while Gattaca is perhaps more hopeful, a message of not judging a book by its cover and understanding the depths of the human spirit to overcome adversity. Why do we want to use this genre device in our storytelling? Well, the Rotten Utopia is a constant reminder that there is no such thing as perfection. Anything that tells you otherwise is trying to sell you something. We are flawed creatures, and every system we make will have its flaws. The more we try to hide its imperfections, the more we have to compromise the morality of the system we've put in place. The cheery, happy-go-lucky iconography of the 50s and the trust in your government and they'll do what's best for you gives way to the world of Fallout in the end. Do you see the goldmine here for storytelling? If you want to be political, if you want to message, if you want to talk about universal truths relating to our need to control and manipulate, and if you want to talk about the desire for freedom, not just of the body but of the mind, here's your playground. This is the genre you want to be in. This is true to some degree or another with all of our examples today, as future worlds are often commentaries on our own, but this is your space to speak freely about politics without coming off as shoehorning it in. To that end, let's talk about some prompts and get the creative juices flowing. In a world where trauma and pain are purged from memory, one person breaks free to understand the truth. This system failed once already. It's happening again. The world knows peace thanks to emotional suppression implants. Outside the city walls are ferals, monsters that know only how to hunt humans, but they were once human too. The algorithm determines the most optimized life for every person. When a brilliant science student is assigned a menial life, he finds the algorithm didn't glitch, it's rebelling. There are some really rotten underbellies to explore beneath those prompts, my friends. It's time to scratch the surface, yes? I did just mention this a little bit when we were discussing the Hunger Games, but our next topic is Fight the System. This genre differentiates itself from the Rotten Utopia because there was never anyone pretending this system was fair or good. For this, we use The Matrix as an obvious example, or V for Vendetta. These are stories that the average person is complacent in a system because it isn't harming them. Anyone that speaks out against it or challenges the system finds out very quickly that they'll have a huge target on their back. In this space, we have the great works like 1984. There isn't anyone with a brain that thinks this totalitarian nightmare is any kind of utopia, but that's also exactly why there aren't many people with a brain anymore. Systems like these want cattle to move through it without question. Questions mean challenges. Challenges mean revolution. And for those at the top of the system, their fear of losing their grip on power is as deadly to them as the guillotine. Once again, we're talking about a wildly political messaging device. These stories capture that part of the human condition that keeps reminding us we're not in the Dark Ages anymore. We like our freedom, and we're not going to go back to a world without it. While I showed some of the many differences between Gattaca and Hunger Games, the message and method of fight the system style stories is much more rigid. The biggest differences between 1984, The Matrix, and V for Vendetta are in setting, style, and method. All of the similar beats are there otherwise. Our protagonist realizes the flaws of the system, desires freedom, there's a catalyst, and then boom, they fight. The hero represents our collective desire to be individuals, while the antagonist represents a system that wants to maintain power at any cost and is rabid in its own self-preservation. And what are some prompts in this space? I was the most trusted face of government news in the country, but when a resistance group showed me the truth, I decided to put a face to their plight. As events are constantly rewritten by the state, one archivist starts putting the pieces of history back together. Suddenly, they're wanted by thought police and a resistance movement. When our hero stumbles on a vault of ancient seeds, they uncover a man-made famine that enslaved the world. The earth will grow again. Even with very different stories and settings, you see how tightly knit these prompts are? That's the kind of rigidity I was talking about. For a more open space creatively, we jump to our next genre, which is Tech Gone Awry. These stories span from the thoughtful cautionary tales like Jurassic Park to the thoughtful cautionary action films like The Terminator. You see, that bit about cautionary shows up to the party with pretty much all of these, but we have so much more freedom here. We can set ourselves up just a few years from the present, like Jurassic Park, or we can have time-traveling robots hell-bent on altering history like The Terminator, or we could live in the future of Blade Runner. In every case, we have a technology that we humans had the hubris to think we had control over. We were gods, and maybe that was true for a minute or two. Now that same technology has turned on us, and only our protagonist stands a chance. What is it with this genre? Why do we have so many stories in this space? I mean, the film Virtuosity holds up today as a decent sci-fi film and an enjoyable performance from Denzel Washington and a young Russell Crowe. But it's also a warning about the dangers of virtual serial killer AI placed in a robotic body. It's not exactly a realistic fear, at least not yet. The truth is that some of these stories will be so fantastical that they border on sounding like 19th century folk talking about the evils of the bicycle. Sometimes you end up with a film like Virtuosity, which is fun despite its lack of understanding and corniness. Other times you end up with The Net, an easily forgotten 90s movie that was trying to be a cautionary tale and warns about the dangers of a very early internet by completely misunderstanding every single detail about it. Even by today's standards, the threat of someone deleting you from society by erasing your records is patently incorrect. If anything, the opposite is true. The internet never forgets, and can sometimes solve cold cases from the 1970s. So, misunderstanding what you're critiquing is a real danger. Do it poorly and you just sound ignorant and paranoid. If you sound like you know what you're talking about, like James Cameron or Michael Crichton, then you have a loud minority name-dropping you 40 years later when the technology catches up with us but the common sense didn't. We want to tell these stories to expound on the dangers of hubris, the reminder that playing God should be left to God, and the stories of heroism when one who saw the danger is willing to fight against it. Keep in mind, these stories might have a short shelf life. I know when I was a kid, I did not think a pad from Star Trek was possible. Now we use them to take drive-through orders. So it helps to be a little bit of a visionary. These are often thoughtful stories. Even when the story is simple, like Save Sarah Connor, it's still built on a wild and all too believable premise. There is a lot of fun to be had in this space. Just make sure you know what you're talking about. With that in mind, let's do some prompts. A woman creates an AI chatbot modeled on her late husband. As he begins to manipulate and push her in ways that her husband never would, she realizes the bot is learning it from her. In a genetically manipulated society, one baby born naturally, a glitch with all of its imperfections, may be the key to save the human race from a genetic disease. An underground VR sim lets you act out a murder fantasy, but when one man comes out to find his wife dead, he needs to find out if he did it, or someone wanted him to think he did. Look at that silly bunch of prompts there. You have the makings of a drama or a thriller in the first one there, a race against the clock or possibly a procedural in the second, and a techno murder mystery in the third. That's what I mean by having a lot of space here, so have some fun. The last genre I want to discuss today is survival of the fittest. These are often post-apocalyptic or dystopian tales in worlds where hope isn't just lost, it's been gone without a map for long enough to think it's dead. Here, the storytelling is going to focus on two key elements: learning to live with it, like The Walking Dead or 28 Days Later, or we're talking about a story of hope. There's some glimmer from our past that gives hope for our future. In this space, we have films like The Book of Eli, which is another Denzel classic that should not be missed, or Children of Men. Even our little buddy, Wall-E, shows up here. Again, we're running the gamut from a long-running series to a horror to drama to a children's movie with an environmental message. Again, there's lots of options here. Why would we want to tell stories in this space? Aren't they all bleak deserts and wastes? Well, Benjamin Wallace found the comedy in that. Mad Max found the action. 28 Days Later found some horror. Book of Eli found hope. Warm Bodies found the rom-com, for Pete's sake. So there is a ton of exploration to be had, and the reason is simple. You're starting the story from the worst possible place for a character to be in. They're either going to find the funny, which is a lesson unto itself, or they're going to fight for domination of the wastes, or they're going to tell us something about the human condition. The key here is human resilience. That's why these stories resonate. They tell us that even in the most dire of circumstances, we're going to keep pressing forward. Even after the world is gone, countries have fallen, and the world won't grow anymore, we'll find a way. What's funny is that these types of stories dovetail off the back of our last genre, Tech Gone Ary. Imagine, if you would, that Skynet gives rise to Terminators, and when fighting us wasn't enough, they dropped nukes on us. But the governments all across the world had developed a network of bomb shelters that a small number of humans would go into and live for a century before coming out. Yes, I'm literally combining Terminator and Fallout. You're welcome. The point is, when technology went awry, we as humanity already failed ourselves. But even in that shell of what was once our world, we can start again. We might start out like warlords in Mad Max or The Walking Dead, but we'll get back up. Some prompts for those who want to survive. The old sage spoke of cities and stars. I'll prove they weren't legends. I'll go out there and find these ruins, and hope they have something to teach me. A traveling group of fugitives finds those that give them shelter and security, and repay them in the only way they know how, the forbidden performances of Shakespeare. Their land was cursed, the wizard that had cast the spell long dead. Can anyone pick up the ancient texts and find the power to break it? Once again, we're in this awesome space with these prompts where we can go so many directions. There's an adventure in the first one, while we could take the second prompt and make it mysterious like the Book of Eli, or a celebration of the human spirit, a love letter to your favorite stage plays, even a comedy of errors. The third one could be a low magic adventure, or the backbone of some sort of post-apocalyptic Harry Potter Magic Academy kind of story. How cool is that? You can make these prompts your own in any way you like. Now before we get out of here, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention one particular favorite of mine that a lot of us slept on, and that was the painfully short-lived series Altered Carbon. The reason I bring it up here at the end is to illustrate to you that you can take anything I've said today about these various genres and tropes, pick and choose the parts that you like, and then squish them together. Altered Carbon has a rotten utopia among the elite. Our main character fought against their system once and lost. The ability to transfer consciousness into any body and basically live forever is a technology gone awry, and it's created a dystopian, cyberpunk-style world 3,000 years into our future. It asks questions about ethics, tells us a mystery, and has plenty of action. This is why the master of Kung Fu and Friendship refuses to stay in his lane. Because if you as a storyteller want to drive the Mad Max truck across all the lanes, from comedy to action to drama, who's going to stop you? No one. That's who. So join me next week when we save the day with superhero stories. Prepare to put your underwear on the outside of your clothes, folks. Honestly, I am a sucker for cyberpunk and post-apocalyptic. It doesn't take much convincing. I mean, I saw Megan, okay? The killer robot with the TikTok dances. And I know I'm going to get dragged to the sequel. Whatever. As long as I get popcorn. Don't forget to check out my new website. The link is in the description below. You'll also find the link to my newsletter in the comments, where you can get a free book, read about all of my latest projects, and find other indie authors for your next great read. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear about new videos, and as always, have fun and get crafting.